When we look at the world's religions, one surprising fact immediately stands out. The same action can have completely different moral meanings depending on who you ask. Something considered a serious sin in one religion may be completely normal in another. For example, eating pork is strictly forbidden in some traditions, while others see no issue with it at all. Idol worship is viewed as a grave sin in certain faiths, yet in others, sacred images are central to devotion. Even practices like alcohol consumption, diet, or warfare are judged very differently across belief systems. So this raises a deeper question. If the same action can be both right and wrong depending on the religion, then what is sin in actual? These differences are not random. Every religion developed its moral teachings within specific historical, cultural, and spiritual environments. Over time, these teachings became deeply connected to the identity of their followers. But once we notice these differences, a deeper philosophical question emerges. If moral rules change across cultures and religions, does that mean morality itself is relative? Or is there a deeper truth behind all of them? This question is explored in a branch of philosophy known as metaethics. One view is of this, moral realism, also known as objective morality, says that some moral truths exist independently of human opinions. According to philosophers such as Plato, Immanuel Kant, and Thomas Aquinas, actions like injustice, cruelty, or murder are wrong in themselves, no matter what people think about them. From this perspective, statements like, "Justice is good," or "Killing innocent people is wrong," are universally true, even if some societies disagree. The opposite position is called moral anti-realism, which denies that there are absolute moral facts. Instead, morality depends on people, feelings, or cultures. Within this view, there are two main ideas. The first is moral subjectivism. This idea says moral judgments depend on a person's feelings. For example, when someone says, "cheating is wrong," it may simply mean, "I personally disapprove of cheating." In this view, morality is based on individual attitudes rather than universal truths. The second idea is moral relativism. Relativism says morality depends on culture or social context. What one society considers morally right may be considered wrong in another society. According to this view, there may not be one single moral standard for all people. Philosophers have debated these ideas for centuries. The philosopher David Hume argued that moral rules do not come directly from facts about the world. He believed morality is strongly connected to human emotions and feelings. Later thinkers such as A.J. Ayer and C.L. Stevenson developed this idea further. They argued that moral statements mainly express emotions rather than describe real facts. However, other philosophers disagreed. For example, Immanuel Kant argued that morality is based on universal principles that human reason can discover. He believed moral rules should apply to everyone equally, not just to certain cultures or individuals. Researchers studying cultures around the world also noticed that moral rules can be very different between societies. For example, the anthropologist Ruth Benedict pointed out that what one society considers normal or moral may be very different in another society. Because of this diversity, some thinkers argue that moral relativism encourages tolerance and understanding between cultures. However, critics of relativism, such as the philosopher James Rachels, point out a serious problem. If morality is completely relative to culture, then it becomes difficult to criticize harmful practices in other societies. For example, if every culture decides its own morality, it would be hard to say that practices like slavery or oppression are universally wrong. Supporters of relativism respond that understanding cultural context does not mean approving everything, but it helps people understand why different societies develop different moral rules. These philosophical positions have important consequences. If moral realism or moral absolutism is correct, then there are objective answers to moral questions, and we can talk about real moral progress. For example, ending slavery or promoting human rights could be seen as genuine improvements in moral understanding. On the other hand, Moral relativism suggests that moral systems are shaped by culture and history, meaning that different societies develop their own moral frameworks. Moral subjectivism, which focuses on personal feelings, can lead to moral skepticism because individuals may treat their own emotions as the final authority. The debate in metaethics helps us understand one of the deepest questions in philosophy. Are moral values universal truths, or are they created by human societies and perspectives? Now let's explore this mystery by two biggest religions in the world. In Christian theology, the study of sin is known as hamartiology, derived from the Greek word hamartia, meaning to miss the mark. Sin is understood not only as wrongdoing, but as a failure to live according to the will and nature of God. A central concept in Christianity is original sin, which is based on the account of Adam and Eve in the book of Genesis. According to this doctrine, humanity inherited a fallen condition as a result of the first act of disobedience. This idea is strongly developed in the writings of St. Augustine, who argued that human beings are born with a sinful nature inclined toward selfishness and separation from God. The New Testament reinforces this view. For example, in Epistle to the Romans 5:12, it states that sin entered the world through one man and spread to all humanity. However, different Christian traditions interpret this doctrine differently. While Roman Catholic and many Protestant traditions emphasize inherited sinfulness, Eastern Orthodox Christianity speaks more of ancestral sin, focusing on the consequences of the fall, such as mortality and corruption, rather than inherited guilt. Christian theology also distinguishes between different types of sin. In Catholic teaching, there is an important distinction between mortal sins and venial sins. Mortal sins are grave offenses committed with full knowledge and deliberate consent, which sever a person's relationship with God, while venial sins are lesser faults that weaken, but do not completely break that relationship. This classification is discussed in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, sections 1854 to 1864. Beyond individual acts, sin is also understood as a state of separation from God, affecting human nature itself. Because of this condition, Christian theology emphasizes the need for salvation and redemption. This is where the concept of atonement becomes central. According to the New Testament, particularly in passages like Gospel of John 3:16, God offers salvation through Jesus Christ. Different theological interpretations explain how this atonement works. The penal substitution theory suggests that Christ took upon himself the punishment that humans deserve, while the satisfaction theory, developed by Anselm of Canterbury, argues that Christ's sacrifice satisfies divine justice. Other views, such as the moral influence theory, emphasize that Christ's life and sacrifice inspire moral transformation, and the Christus Victor model presents Christ's death and resurrection as a victory over sin and death. So, what we have concluded is that sin is not just about actions, but about a deep inner condition of human nature. Because of the doctrine of original sin, humans are believed to be naturally inclined toward wrongdoing. This means morality is not only about following rules, but about restoring a broken relationship with God through grace and salvation. In this framework, even thoughts, intentions, and inner desires can be sinful, not just visible actions. In Islamic theology, the study of sin does not have a single formal term like hamartiology, but it is deeply developed within the broader framework of Aqidah and Sharia. Sin in Islam is understood primarily as disobedience to the will of Allah, rather than an inherited condition of human nature. A central concept here is fitra, the natural state in which every human being is born, pure, morally aware, and inclined toward truth. This idea is supported in the Quran, which describes humanity as created upon a natural disposition toward faith. Because of this, Islam rejects the idea of original sin. Instead, every individual is considered morally responsible only for their own actions. The story of Adam and Eve is also present in Islam, but unlike in Christianity, their mistake is followed by repentance and forgiveness, as described in the Quran 2:37. This establishes a key principle. Sin does not permanently corrupt human nature, and no person inherits guilt from another. Islamic teachings classify sins into different categories, most notably major sins, kaba'ir, and minor sins, sagair. Major sins include actions explicitly forbidden in the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, such as shirk, associating partners with God, murder, theft, and injustice. Minor sins are lesser wrongs that can be forgiven through good deeds and sincere repentance. This classification is supported by verses such as Quran 4:31, which indicates that avoiding major sins leads to the forgiveness of lesser ones. Importantly, Islam emphasizes that sin is not only about outward actions, but also includes intentions, niyyah. A well-known hadith recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari states that actions are judged by intentions, meaning that moral accountability depends on both what a person does and what they intend. However, unlike some interpretations in Christianity, Islam generally does not consider involuntary thoughts themselves as sinful unless they are acted upon. Repentance, known as tawbah, is a central and hopeful aspect of Islamic theology. The Quran 39:53 emphasizes that Allah's mercy is vast and that all sins can be forgiven if a person sincerely repents. Tawbah involves recognizing the sin, feeling genuine remorse, stopping the wrongdoing, and intending not to return to it. There is no need for an intermediary. The relationship between the individual and God is direct. This highlights a key difference from Christian theology. While Christianity often emphasizes salvation through the atonement of Christ, Islam emphasizes personal responsibility, direct accountability, and divine mercy without inherited guilt. Ultimately, Islamic theology presents sin as a temporary moral failure, not a permanent condition. Human beings are seen as capable of both error and righteousness, but always with the opportunity to return to God. This balance between justice, adl, and mercy, rahmah, forms the foundation of the Islamic understanding of sin, morality, and spiritual growth. Now, when we compare these two perspectives, something very important becomes clear. The difference is not just in the rules, but in the understanding of human nature itself. In Christianity, humans are seen as inherently fallen, so sin is a deep inner condition. In Islam, humans are seen as naturally pure, so sin is a conscious choice. And from this single difference, entire moral systems begin to diverge. The same action, whether a thought, a desire, or a behavior, can be judged differently because each religion starts from a different understanding of what it means to be human. When we move from religion and philosophy into science, the question of sin takes on a completely different form. Science does not use the word sin, but it studies something closely related, human moral behavior, which is why we feel something is right or wrong, why we experience guilt, and how we make moral decisions. Instead of asking whether an action is sinful in the eyes of God, science asks, what is happening inside the human mind and brain when we judge something as wrong? Modern research in neuroscience shows that moral decision-making is not random. It involves specific areas of the brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for reasoning, self-control, and judgment, and the amygdala, which processes emotions like fear, empathy, and anger. When a person faces a moral dilemma, such as whether to lie or tell the truth, these brain regions work together, balancing logic and emotion. This suggests that what we call moral judgment is partly a biological process shaped by how our brains function. At the same time, evolutionary psychology offers another layer of explanation. From an evolutionary perspective, moral behavior may have developed because it helped early humans survive in groups. Traits like cooperation, fairness, and empathy increase the chances of survival, while behaviors like betrayal or violence within the group could be harmful. Over thousands of years, natural selection may have favored individuals who followed certain social rules. In this sense, what religions later called sin could be understood as behaviors that were harmful to group survival and social stability. Then, there is the psychological dimension, especially the study of guilt and shame. Psychology shows that humans are deeply affected by these emotions. Guilt usually arises when a person feels they have done something wrong, while shame is more about feeling that one is wrong or flawed. These emotions act as internal regulators. They push people to correct their behavior, repair relationships, or avoid repeating harmful actions. In many ways, they function similarly to the religious idea of sin. They create an inner sense of accountability, even without external punishment. But here is where things become even more interesting. Science can explain how we make moral decisions, but it struggles to explain why something is truly right or wrong in an absolute sense. Neuroscience can show which brain areas activate during moral thinking, but it cannot prove whether a moral belief is objectively true. Evolution can explain why cooperation evolved, but it cannot tell us whether helping others is morally good in a universal sense. This is where science meets the same limits discussed in philosophy, especially the idea highlighted by David Hume, that we cannot derive an ought, what we should do, from an is, what simply exists. So in the end, the question is not just what is a sin, but who decides what counts as one. Because the same action can be seen as obedience in one world and wrongdoing in another. And that means sin is not just about what we do, but about the lens through which we see it.